Once in the land of Moab there was a woman named Naomi. She had a husband named Elimelech and two sons, Mahlon and Chilion. Life wasn't always easy, but they managed to make do. However, a severe famine struck the land of Judah, and so Naomi and her family made the difficult decision to leave their home and travel to Moab in search of food. But tragedy struck. First, Naomi's husband Elimelech died, and then her sons Mahlon and Chilion died too. Naomi was left alone, a widow, with no children and no protection in a foreign land. In her grief, Naomi heard that the Lord had provided food for his people back in Bethlehem, so she decided to return home. But she knew the journey would be hard, and she had nothing to offer her daughters-in-law, Orpah and Ruth, who were both widows themselves. Naomi turned to them and said, "Go back to your mother's homes. There is nothing for you with me. I have no more sons to give you. I'm too old to remarry." And so Naomi began her journey back to Bethlehem with a heavy heart but a glimmer of hope, not knowing what the future held for her and her daughters-in-law. Orpah, after much sorrow, kissed Naomi goodbye and returned to her family. But Ruth wasn't like Orpah. Ruth clung to Naomi and said something that would echo through history. "Don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God." Naomi saw Ruth's resolve. Ruth wasn't just following Naomi to Bethlehem. She was making a decision that would change her life forever. She was choosing Naomi's God, the God of Israel, even though she didn't know what lay ahead. Ruth's loyalty was unwavering. So Naomi and Ruth set off for Bethlehem together. It was the beginning of the barley harvest when they arrived. Ruth, eager to provide for her mother-in-law, went to the fields to glean the leftover grain. It was hard work, and Ruth was a foreigner in a strange land, but she didn't complain. She was determined to care for Naomi. Now, unbeknownst to Ruth, there was a man named Boaz who owned the fields she had chosen. Boaz was a relative of Naomi's late husband, and he was a man of great wealth, but more importantly, he was known for his integrity and kindness. When Boaz saw Ruth working in his field, he inquired about her, and the workers told him about her loyalty to Naomi. Moved by her devotion, Boaz told Ruth to stay in his fields, where she would be safe. He instructed his workers to leave extra grain for her to gather so she would not go hungry. When Naomi heard what Boaz had done, she saw the hand of God at work. Boaz was a kinsman redeemer, someone who, according to the law, had the right to marry a widow in order to preserve her late husband's family line. Naomi, seeing this, hatched a plan. She told Ruth to wash, put on her best clothes, and go to Boaz at the threshing floor, where he would be resting after a long day's work. Ruth did as Naomi instructed, and when Boaz lay down, Ruth approached him. In a humble, respectful way, she asked him to redeem her, to marry her, and restore her family's line. Boaz, stunned by her boldness and moved by her character, agreed. But there was one issue. There was a closer relative who had the first right to redeem her. Boaz, being a man of honor, promised to settle the matter. The next day, Boaz went to the city gate and spoke with the relative, offering him the chance to redeem Ruth. But when the relative realized that redeeming Ruth would also mean marrying her and taking on Naomi's property, he declined. Boaz, without hesitation, agreed to take on the responsibility. He redeemed Ruth, and they were married. Ruth and Boaz's marriage brought joy and restoration. Soon, Ruth conceived a son, and Naomi's heart was filled with happiness. The women in the village rejoiced, saying, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a kinsman redeemer." They named the child Obed, and he became the father of Jesse, who was the father of David, the great king of Israel. And from that line would eventually come the Savior of the world, Jesus Christ. As we look back on Ruth's story, we see a woman of extraordinary character. Ruth wasn't just a widow. She was a woman who displayed incredible faith, loyalty, and humility. She chose to stay with Naomi, even though it meant leaving everything familiar behind. She didn't know what the future held, but she trusted in God's plan. Ruth's story teaches us some profound lessons. 1. Loyalty and faithfulness. Ruth showed a deep, sacrificial loyalty to Naomi. In our own lives, we can learn from Ruth's example of sticking with those we love, even in hard times. Loyalty is a rare but precious trait, especially in a world that often focuses on self-interest. 2. Trusting God's plan. Ruth didn't know how God would provide, but she trusted him. Like Ruth, we may not always see the full picture, but we can choose to trust that God is working on our behalf. God's timing is perfect, and he has a plan for our lives, just as he had a plan for Ruth. 3. Kindness and generosity. Boaz's kindness toward Ruth was an extension of God's grace. He could have ignored her, but he chose to go above and beyond, ensuring her safety and providing for her needs. We, too, are called to show kindness and generosity to those around us, particularly those in need. 4. Redemptions and hope. Ruth's story is a story of redemption. She went from being a poor widow to being part of the lineage of King David and ultimately the lineage of Jesus Christ. God used Boaz to redeem her, and in the same way he offers redemption to us through Jesus. Ruth's story reminds us that God can bring beauty from the ashes of our lives, and that his plans for us are often far greater than we can imagine. Ruth's legacy is one of unwavering faith, love, and hope. As Christians, we are called to live with that same courage, trust, and loyalty. We may not always understand God's path for us, but like Ruth, we can rest in the knowledge that God is always working behind the scenes, guiding us toward a future filled with his grace and redemption. Just as God used Ruth's faithfulness to bring about his plan of salvation, he can use our lives for his glory as well.